Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us. This is Left Bank Books welcomes St. Louis author Margaret Hermes, who will discuss her new novel, The Opposite of Chance. Hermes will be in conversation tonight with UMSL professor and author Mary Troy. Left Bank Books is St. Louis's oldest independent bookstore. We would like to thank all of our supporters, the supporters of Margaret and Mary, and everyone for their outpouring of love for our bookstore. We offer curbside pickup and delivery to anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. You can also find this book on our front table and on our shelves. We are very happy to be able to bring our event series virtual. We believe that events are a way to expand your mind and bring in new thoughts to make the world a better place. We hope that you enjoy this event, and we hope that you support Left Bank Books by purchasing a signed copy for you or for all of your friends at left-bank.com. Margaret is so kind, and since she is local, she will even personalize a copy for you. So if you have a friend that you think would just absolutely appreciate and enjoy this book, you could have Margaret personalize it directly to them. If you want it personalized to you, you can request that as well. So when you are making your purchase, just in the order comments, make sure to say who you would like your book personalized to. But you can also just get a signed copy as well. And purchasing a copy of the book from Left Bank Books allows us to keep our bookstore and staff operating, and it allows us to keep this event series going. So thank you for your support. I am Shane Mullen. I'm the events coordinator for Left Bank Books. I help produce our hundreds of author events each year with a fantastic team here in St. Louis. We will be taking questions from you, the audience, towards the end of the hour. So you can type your questions as a comment, and you can do that at any point in time throughout the event. And be sure to follow Left Bank Books on Facebook and YouTube to be notified about all of our fantastic virtual events. Now about tonight's book, Opposite of Chance. At 32, Betsy is sheltered by a close-knit family, Catholic schools, college in her hometown, and a marriage at 20. It takes the discovery of her husband's serial philandering to open her eyes and push her out of the nest. It's the summer of 1981. Betsy grabs a backpack and a few good books and puts distance, geographically and emotionally, between herself and the life she knew in the American Midwest. She begins to make her own decisions about cities, hotels, dinner entrees, at airports, on trains, and in pensiones. Betsy takes her first steps into independence as she negotiates the brief but intense relationships travelers have. Armed with a book of travelers' phrases and a Swiss Army knife, she brushes up against possibilities for connection, almost entering the life stories of the strangers she chances upon and whose paths we follow in alternating chapters. We become acquainted with a devout Muslim on a pilgrimage, a French financier raised on a rabbit farm, a lawyer on a solo honeymoon, a Pakistani gambler, a beguiling American threesome en route to Venice, an Italian hotel owner on Lake Como, and a passionate Irish protester who literally carries her to safety from the streets of Dublin. Finally, back home, Betsy comes to the startling realization that her journey is only just beginning. Mary Troy, who happens to be our conversation partner tonight, says, Margaret Hermes writes with humor and wisdom about women who confuse sex for love and love for sex and cannot decide which one they prefer. And Bob Shakakis, the National Book Award-winning author of Easy in the Islands and Swimming in the Volcano, says, wise and confident, an exquisitely talented writer. Now about tonight's speakers. Margaret Hermes grew up in Chicago and lives in St. Louis. Her short fiction collection, Relative Strangers, was the recipient of the Doris Bakwin Award, in addition to dozens of stories that have appeared in journals such as Fiction International, the Laurel Review, Confrontation, River Styx, and the Literary Review, and in anthologies such as 20 Over 40 and Under the Arch. Her published and performed work include a novel, The Phoenix Nest, and a stage adaptation of an Oscar Wilde fable. When not writing, she concentrates her energies on environmental issues. And tonight, Margaret will be in conversation with Mary Troy. Mary is the author of the story collections Cookie, The Alibi Café, and Joe Baker is Dead, as well as the novels Swimming on Hwy N and Beauties. Her stories have appeared in the Chicago Tribune, Boulevard, Greensboro Review, and numerous other publications. And now, without further ado, would you please help me in welcoming our fantastic guests for the evening? We have Margaret Hermes and Mary Troy for Left Bank Books. Hello.
Hello. Hello.
We have a great crowd already here. So I am going to pass this over to you for the conversation, and I will be back for the audience Q&A towards the end of the hour.
Thanks, Shane.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank Shane and Left Bank for hosting this. And I also want to really thank you, Mary, for your support and your generosity.
Oh, well, I'm really, really excited to get to discuss writing with you, your book, The Opposite of Chance, and also writing in general. But I want to echo what Shane said and what you said about Left Bank Books. It is really one of the best bookstores for miles and miles and thousands of miles. And it's always felt like home to me. So Margaret, I want to start talking with a really big question. Okay, we talk about the hard work of fiction writing, as well as the joys of it. And I'm often reminded of something that maybe is apocryphal, but could have happened. And it's an exchange that supposedly took place with Alice Munro as she was going on and on about what a blessing it was to have lived her life as a writer and to spend her life as a writer. And someone interrupted her and said, well, Alice, if you love it so much, why do you always seem so crabby? Why do you always look so frustrated? And she said, because it's really hard work. And I know it's hard work for me, and I know it's hard work for you, because if it's easy, then it's hard reading, and your books are not hard reading. So could you talk a little bit about why you write, if it is so hard?
Well, I think I write because I have to. It doesn't feel optional. If it were optional, I'd probably be doing something else. But I feel like I've had a push to become a writer. My mother wrote as a child. She lived in a small coal mining town outside of Springfield, Illinois, and she would write Zane Grey kinds of stories on butcher paper and bring them to school, and her classmates would copy them. And this went on for years until she graduated grade school and went to high school. And then her writing career was over. And I sort of, as a kid, felt that I had a little bit of a torch that I was supposed to be carrying, which was a gift.
Yeah, that is a gift. Yeah. Yeah, very much so. Okay. So
I should also tell you that when I was a kid and I was asked what it was I wanted to be when I grew up, I would invariably say a nun, a writer, or a spy. So I think I picked the best one.
That's really great. Well, it's typical too of going to Catholic schools back in the old days. Okay, so there are many things I really like about your novel, The Opposite of Chance, but one of them that struck me from the very beginning is your voice, the voice of the persona you take on to tell the story, the narrator's voice, the attitude of the narrator sort of toward the characters and toward the story. And your narrator has this voice of honesty and of authenticity and authority. And I know it's kind of a hard-won battle to come up with the right voice, to portray the right attitude. And I wonder then if you could, to demonstrate what I mean by that, if you could read some pages of your book, the beginning. Yeah, I was thinking of pages 7, 8, and 9, which are really the first 3 pages of the book. because I think that's when we first encounter Betsy.
Glad to. I guess no introduction for this is needed, except maybe to say that the title of that chapter is Take Me to the War.
Okay.
Betsy was not a complete idiot, though once again she felt like one. She had been grateful to the travel agent for securing a cheap fare from Montreal to Paris, but now, waiting at Mirabel Airport for her first transatlantic flight, each time she heard French spoken, she thought reflexively that everyone around her was more cultured, except perhaps the young boy sandwiched between his parents who was energetically excavating his nose. She had grown up in Milwaukee, gone to college in Milwaukee, married in Milwaukee, embarked on graduate school in Milwaukee. She had taken French classes in which she did reasonably well when tested on grammar or vocabulary, but in which her tongue, or arguably the vocal folds of her larynx, led her to fail dismally in articulation and therefore in confidence, hence fatally in conversation. Like choking on your own tongue, her sister Gina, who had an obedient larynx, had supplied sympathetically. She had chosen to pursue a graduate degree in anthropology, in part because anthropologists seemed predestined to travel, and in part because the study of kinship ties in tribal societies promised to be sparklingly devoid of the unbridled opportunities the Romance languages afforded to garble nasal words, nasal vowels, and the gargled R. Not only was she unable to pronounce French, she couldn't hear it. She had never overheard French outside a classroom in all her years in Milwaukee. German, ja, Polish, tak, Italian, si, even Serbian, da, but never French, jamais. Her ear could not distinguish between war, gare, and the train station, gare. The sounds were interchangeable when they were not indecipherable. This would be borne out for her explicitly some days later when she requested a taxi driver to take her to the train station, and he replied that there was no war in France. She had missed it by 4 decades, précisément by 35 years and 3 months. He would illustrate with hands grasping an invisible Thompson M1928 and saying, ack, 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 repeatedly in the universal language of guns. There were no open seats at her designated gate. That must mean the plane was oversold. She pictured herself discovering another passenger, snug and smug in her assigned seat, his boarding pass identical to her own. Prior possession would be enough to ensure that he would go to Europe in her place. She wondered if she would ever get off the ground. Betsy settled herself at the empty, opposing gate. She looked across the wide aisle nervously, speculating on the odds that her flight would be canceled or her backpack stolen. Her eyes dropped as a man in a rumpled suit approached. From a distance, he looked like a house detective in an old movie. She feared he was coming to chastise her, tell her she should not be seated there. But he walked past her to the large expanse of windows. He rustled through a creased, duty-free bag and his dog-eared piece of carry-on luggage in their quiet corner. She watched through half-lidded eyes as he set a compass on the floor. He removed a folded, patterned orange and brown shawl from his carry-on, spread it on the floor, and knelt, his back to her, letting his shoes fall away from the heels of his feet. She noticed that the counters of his shoes folded inward, completely flat, allowing him to compromise with his faith, shoes half off, fitted only on his forefeet. When he bent his forehead to the shawl, she saw that his hair was dyed, and the roots matched the gray in his mustache. Why would he dye his hair? This was the kind of question she believed she would be able to answer at the end of her travels. The area around them started to fill. Some families, several women with headscarves, one head wrapped in an improbable Burberry signature beige with red and black plaid. She wondered if she had chosen a gate set aside for Muslims. She had never seen any Muslims before, at least none she was aware of. She wondered if attending Catholic schools from kindergarten through grad school had isolated her more than the typical Milwaukeean. But then she thought, no, if anything, that marked her as a typical Milwaukeean. The man sat back on his heels and refolded the shawl and retrieved his compass and tucked both into the shopping bag. When he turned away from the window, she was startled by how sensationally, almost aggressively handsome he was, how refined his features. He looked like a movie star down on his luck, the suit in need of pressing, the hair dyed for his last role, or a movie star playing someone down on his luck. The warm brown of his skin appeared no deeper than a perfect Hollywood tan. Was there such a thing as a Muslim movie star? Wouldn't being a film idol be forbidden? Wasn't it akin to encouraging the worship of icons? Whatever his career, she was certain of one thing. He was unmarried. A wife would not let him out into the world looking so at odds with himself. Betsy had spent the preceding decade, all of the 1970s, in the role of wife, and so she knew.
Both. Thank you. I really just am impressed by that beginning. I mean, we get Betsy feeling like an idiot, and yet not minding that she's an idiot, sort of, willing to be made fun of, willing to be brave. We get a little neurotic tendencies about, oh, I probably won't even get on this flight, and somebody else will take my seat. And then all of this sort of naivete that that we find her kind of endearing. We don't agree with her on everything, and we're not sure that she's going to be right, but we know the narrator is, because the narrator can talk about Betsy in this way and present her. And I think that's it's such a nice beginning, because this is kind of the contract you make with the reader. This is the kind of story it's going to be, and then it really is that kind of story. And I wonder if you would talk a little bit about when that beginning came to you. I know you worked on this book for many years. Did the beginning come last or first, or
In the middle.
in the middle?
The book started out as a collection of stories about Betsy, and I wasn't satisfied with that. I wanted the book to be more than one woman's quest for independence, and I wanted to have her not be the only driving force in the book. I wanted the book to have a larger view. And interestingly, what happened to Betsy actually happened to me in this sense. I was at an airport in Montreal, and I did see this gentleman, this amazing looking man. And I watched him as he said his prayers, and I could not stop thinking about him. And I, like the protagonist, I wondered about the hair and why this man would have dyed his hair. I thought about him so often that one day when I was thinking about him, I thought, this is the answer to my problem with the structure of this book. I am going to bring this man into the story, and I am going to make the next chapter be about him, and I am going to find out why he dyed his damn hair. And that is chapter 2.
Yeah. And you did that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is terrific. And it is often true that some little thing that, you saw or thought or felt 15, 20 years ago will find its way into your novels or your stories, something that sort of nags at you over and over again. Yeah, that's terrific. Thanks for that.
Well, thanks for the question.
So after this really nice beginning, then we get the information about, Betsy's marriage has ended, and we get these really great descriptions, like just of like grad school housing from the 70s and the 80s, the bookcase made of boards and concrete blocks, and the whole group coming over to watch Saturday Night Live, which I thought was really funny. And it once again gives it sort of this sense of authority, and the infidelity too, the sort of infidelity that was a part of many people's lives in the 70s and 80s, that I'm not sure, it's almost like you're doing anthropology in a way to sort of talk about that, the sort of freedom that people believed they had anyway. I imagine young people maybe have a hard time with that. Or has anyone ever said anything about that?
Well, not so far, or maybe to someone else, but not to me. But I think it's really sort of delightful that you picked up on the word anthropology there, because of course that's what she was studying. I mean,
yeah, I know. I thought that was really interesting. So then we get to this other part of the book that, or this other technique in the book that you mentioned, that you wanted to follow Kasim and find out why he dyed his hair, and you have this sort of bravery to leave your story, leave Betsy, and go and tell the stories of other people who she's seen, other people she's talked to on the trains or in the pensions, and it's really fascinating. Then you tell their lives, and they become more than secondary characters. So it's interesting that you say these were at first separate short stories, because many of them I think still could and do stand alone, many of the chapters. But doing that sort of slows the pace of the book down too, which means we're not racing to the end to see what's going to happen at the end of the journey, which is fine, because she doesn't know where she's going anyway. And we don't know where she's going. And so it really works to sort of fill out the world. And I wonder if I could ask you to read another little section, which is, this is kind of near the end of the book. And this one is in Ireland. Let me see if I can, don't think I wrote these pages down, but you probably know which one I mean.
Yeah, I do, because we had talked before, and you had mentioned page 153 to 155.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to.
Oh, thank you.
I should say, to begin, give you a little bit of preface, because otherwise you won't know who these characters are. So in the north, we are joining the Beatty family, who live in Lisburn in Northern Ireland, and they are in mourning for Joan, the mother who has died recently and unexpectedly. Betsy had met Brian Beatty, the elder son, on the ferry crossing from France to Ireland, and he later describes her as ancient but brilliant for all that. Well, the one thing we learned about Brian in the preceding chapter is that he is a talker. And the one thing we surmise about him is that he blames himself for his mother's sudden death. Jack is the taciturn father who had a combative relationship with his wife. Dennis is the irascible younger son who, since his mother's death, has aligned himself with the Ulster Defense and against the Irish Republican Army, and had 2 run-ins with the police. Eileen is the dead woman's sister, and Molly is Joan's only daughter, who, out of a lot of worry about her family, has planned a balloon send-off where everyone is supposed to say one thing that they are angry with Joan for, and then let go of their anger and of the balloon. Everyone was shifting uncomfortably on the folding chairs borrowed from the neighbor. not knowing what to do. They all felt foolish, even Molly, each grasping the string to a purple helium balloon so that they were looking down when the rain began, a fine mist. "Ah, Ma," said Dennis, eyes lifted skyward. "You've kept your sense of humor, I see." "We'd best press on if we're doing this," grumbled the senior Beatty. "I'll get mine done with." He cleared his throat. "Joan, you were me first love, me best and me worst love. If you didn't have a temper in you that could scorch the devil himself, you might be here with us still. It's murder thinking that every day, so I'm letting the thought and you go." Everyone gasped. His was a much longer speech than expected. They'd been anticipating something more along the lines of cheers. Jack Beatty released his balloon. "I'll be taking my turn," Molly said, breathing deeply and raising her eyes. "When Brian was born, I wanted a sprague of my own. I pleaded and wheedled, and you finally had Da bring me home a cloth doll with yarn hair. But I knew that was just a doll, and I wanted a baby. So Aunt Eileen bought me a doll that had shiny pink skin and real hair for me to brush and eyes that closed when I laid her down. And she cried. I loved that she cried. But you hated it. You said it made your milk come. One day, I'm in the kitchen, and there you were with a screwdriver. You were sticking it into my baby's back. You were taking out the batteries, I guess, but what I saw was you stabbing my sweet baby. And she never cried after that because she was dead. And you were fine with that. I forgive you for killing my baby, Ma." Molly let her balloon go. Almost defiant, Eileen said, "You were the best big sister anyone could have wanted. It was you that got me ready for school every morning and saw to it I was neat and clean and brushed and braided. The teachers thought you were hard and that I was the sweet, well-behaved one because you made me look sweet and you taught me my manners. I'll never forget when I was in senior infants and somehow I forgot to put on my knickers one morning and the teacher said we were going to have PE that day and we would be tumbling on the mats, and I knew it would be the worst thing that had happened in my life or would ever happen. That everyone would see me bum and all." She reddened at the memory as though she were 5 years old and it was only yesterday. "I told the teacher that I had to talk to my sister, and I still can't believe she let me go over to the third form, and your teacher let you come out to the hall. You took me into the bathroom and you gave me your knickers. I knew you would fix it, but I didn't know how. I always knew that if anything went wrong, I could go to you, Joan, and that's the hardest thing." She choked back a sob, "Knowing I can't go back to you now or ever." Eileen released her balloon. "You've caused the sadness and you're not there to console me." Dennis said, "I'm up now, am I? Grand." He cleared his throat. "Ma, there isn't anyone here you didn't give a hard time, including your sister, who you apparently taught to never speak ill of the dead. But we all loved you, and you loved all of us, and in the end, I guess that has to be enough." Dennis let go of his string and gave a flick to the balloon to urge it upward. "Well, Brian, we've never known you to sit quiet. Now's not the occasion to go mute. Get on with it before this mist turns into a lashing." Brian said, "I'm sorry, Ma, that I was a disappointment to you. Says I to you, says you to me." He opened his hand and let his string go. His relatives waited, knowing volumes more were to follow. But Brian lapsed back into silence. Suddenly, Eileen shrieked, "Effing Christ!" before clapping a hand over her blasphemous mouth. She pointed heavenward. All eyes rose from Brian's face. The helium balloons, all of them, even Jack's that had drifted up and away minutes ago, had been dragged down by the mist and were now massed together directly over Brian's head. "Like bleeding thoughts. Thought balloons in a comic strip," Dennis marveled. dark, broody purple thoughts. Perfect, said Jack, shaking his head. Now we know you were listening, Joan. Run for the house, it's bucketing now, Molly instructed needlessly. When they looked out the window, after an hour or so, the balloons were still huddled over Brian's chair.
Oh, that's really nice, and it also exemplifies, of course, the humor in the novel, which of which there is plenty, and I really did like that. And once again, these are people that Betsy has met the two boys on the ship, right?
Right. Only one was one of those boys. The other was Brian's friend.
Yeah, Brian's friend who had a girlfriend that he was mooning over. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, when you talk about voices, it's interesting to me because I think of this as a book of multiple voices and even multiple narrators because of the point of view shift, and because I tried very hard to speak with the voice from that perspective. So like the Hassin, the Muslim in chapter 2, the English, I think, there is more stilted than in chapter 1, where we're seeing things basically from Betsy's perspective. So that was both a challenge and a real delight. I really enjoyed that aspect.
And it's interesting, though, too, that it seems like for almost all of your characters, there's almost a consistent distance, though. I mean, sometimes you are in their minds, but you pull back so that we can see them in ways that they can't see themselves, and you do that throughout. I think for most of your characters, which is really nice too, because in that way we are sometimes more aware of the narrator, and I do like that. And some of these sections, as you mentioned earlier, were written as separate short stories and can stand alone. And the one that is my favorite, but it's too long to read, and people will just have to buy the book and read it, is chapter 5, which is Betsy on the train from Nice to, I think she's going to Florence, and the woman with all of the foliage, with all the stems and the leaves and the dead flowers, and then and that belligerent, arrogant man who she decides not to talk to, and then at the end he decides not to talk to her. I mean, it's the ending is really just wonderful too. So that was a really nice chapter, and you can understand Betsy. She didn't want to talk to this loudmouth American. I mean, she's in Nice, and why would she?
Right. Yeah. That chapter was a lot of fun to write, and actually that was one of the earlier chapters, and was written as a standalone story and was published that way. But I did have a whole lot of fun writing that one. Describing that dreadful woman with her malodorous stockinged feet that ended up on Betsy during the train trip, and the interaction between the two men in the car, the obnoxious guy from Florida and the young Pakistani. That was a really fun thing to explore.
Yeah, and the woman wouldn't even let him open the window very much, and it reminded me of a few train trips I was on in Europe too. So, was it also based on fact? Were you in a car with people like this?
I remember that woman and her children. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, one of the great things about travel and writing is that you do get, a wealth of things to pepper your stories with. I mean, I'm always ready to steal
Yeah.
you know, overheard phrases and interactions and physical descriptions. It's all, well, as you know, I mean,
Right.
it's all fodder.
It is. It is. And so we accept you as a guide, and we accept Betsy as a guide, and we accept some of the other characters. And another reason we do is you give us such lovely descriptions that give us like this really true sense of place. So we feel as if we are there. So the world then becomes visible. And I wonder if you would just read one more little section. This one is from chapter 9. It's pages 107 and 108. And it takes place, I believe, in the Lake Country.
One of my favorite sections.
Oh, good. Okay.
In this chapter, the title is An Innocent / Abroad. Betsy is being pursued by this middle-aged hotel owner. And as Mary was saying, for me, I hope that this particular section shows how the places that Betsy visits are more than settings for interactions between her and the characters she meets. I think of the places as sort of characters in themselves, having their own persona. So, in the meantime, Signor Alfieri did not give up. Betsy was impressed, almost touched, by his dogged persistence. When she sat out on the pier with its cultivated appearance of a formal garden, reading a novel or the collection of poems she had brought from Florence, Signor Alfieri was apt to appear at her left shoulder, talking out of the right side of his mouth. You rest here the day. Maybe later I can come to you. The afternoon we are together. Betsy would only shake her head and laugh, careful neither to encourage nor discourage him, for either of these would mean she took him seriously. Still, to be safe, on those afternoons, she reluctantly took herself away from the pier to wander the streets of the village or steam into the throbbing city of Como. The lake itself surpassed Betsy's airy anticipations. According to a local brochure, Shelley had written to a contemporary declaring his intent to find a house on Como. This lake exceeds anything I ever beheld in beauty, with the exception of the arbutus island of Killarney. Betsy would soon have the chance to make that comparison for herself. Such a funny guide, chance, to bring her here where she had never meant to come. In the daylight, after a night's rain, and it seemed to rain every night, yet never before sundown, the green of the hills shimmered. The color was so lush that merely taking in the view seemed an exercise in hedonism. Scattered amid the thickly verdant growth were collections of dwellings, pale buildings hooded by faded orange tiles, crisp geometric shapes among all the undulating green. In the morning, Betsy could sit contentedly, just looking for hours. But at dusk, when the lake was more beautiful than she could bear, she would walk restlessly up and down the meticulously raked pebble-banked promenade beneath the manicured trees, her eyes and her feet never still. At dusk, the light over the water softened and lied. Hill beyond hill was shrouded in deepening veils of mist, making each seem a false shadow of the one before. In the haze, the house lights shone yellow and warm, like fireflies or lanterns or candles in the windows. When dark came, it transformed all parts of the picture, smoothing the ripples on the water, absorbing the repeating hills, and draining the house lights until they were a thin, starry white. After only the second night, Betsy lost all sight of leaving.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I've been told by the moderator, by Shane, that that we will have questions and answers pretty soon. And so anyone who has questions can please type them in the comment section. And in the meantime, I wanted to talk a little bit about two things. I notice in here there's quite a bit about infidelity, not only with Betsy's husband, but one of the characters, Christian, is quite tempted. There's a triangle going on in Florence that Betsy is slow to realize. The pension proprietor is pursuing her, and his daughter finally has her own chapter and has a liaison with a man who's already promised to someone else. And so this all sort of echoes the infidelity of the husband. And I wonder, would you say the book is about that in any way?
Well, certainly the subject is touched on frequently in the book. Betsy is interested in various men that she meets to one degree or another. And it turns out that some of those are married, and she does not want to be part of that kind of relationship. She's still definitely a product of her upbringing. And it's not just that. I mean, it's a choice. But I think one of the things that, rather than infidelity being my interest, I think my interest was in the idea of trust.
Yeah.
I think when you have felt victimized, you have a very hard time trusting. And one of the things that I wanted to explore without being heavy-handed was that it's not just that you have a hard time trusting other people, or that she had a hard time trusting other men. You have a hard time trusting yourself. If you've been a fool, or you feel that you've been a fool or an idiot, it's very hard to place trust in yourself, in your choices, in your judgment. So I would say that was the theme that I was going for.
Yeah, I can see that, and I think it's a nice way to say it. And of course, the journey is partly for Betsy to trust herself, that she can do it and that she can make good decisions, but also to trust that what she believes is true is true. Like, this is the right train. This is these people will take care of her, and I think her trust does grow at various times, and I really like the way that plays out.
And it's not always a straight path. I mean, here and there, she takes some steps forward and then retreats or stumbles backward. But
I think that's that's one of the things we like about it. I mean, you don't want to read just a straight path.
right.
Yeah. Okay. Shane's back.
I'm back. Thank you both so much for really just a beautiful conversation. Margaret, thank you for all those readings. Really stunning.
Thank you.
Have maybe the question came in very early, so I think we have one question from the audience, but we have a good audience. So if you are watching, which I know you are, you should type up your questions now. Let's start with Joseph's question. So Joseph is asking, you're saying you are a superb stylist. Does it come naturally, or is it the result of multiple drafts?
Ooh, actually, this is a question I like, because I like being able to say that, unlike lots and lots of people, many of whom are fabulous writers, I really like editing. I enjoy going over and over and over my work and trying to find just the exact right phrase and the right punctuation. I try to be a stylist. So thank you, Joseph, whoever you are. But, you know, the other thing about going over and over and over things, I did an incredible amount of research for this book. The second chapter, which involves a pilgrimage to Mecca for the gentleman who dyed his hair, I probably spent 4 months reading. It's a good thing this wasn't my 9-to-5 job anyway. I read so much. I mean, not that I retain any of it, but I really, really immersed myself. And one of the really hard things to do, and I'd be interested in hearing what Mary would say about this, is not to use all the research. I really struggled in various places not to use everything that I learned that I thought was interesting and that I thought a reader would enjoy, but sort of blocked the story at certain points. Mary, what's your experience with research?
Well, it's very similar. I agree. The research is fascinating, but it can become an excuse not to write too. I mean, eventually I haven't finished researching. I have these 2 more books to read or something, so you're putting off really the hard part because the research is somehow easy, but you have to immerse yourself, and then as long as you know it and the background is there, and at least one of your characters knows it or knows what he has to, you don't have to say it all. It will come through because your job is not to write another research book that people may want to read. But it's great fun. It's one of the most enjoyable parts of writing, really.
I actually had pages and pages and pages about the hunger strikers in Ireland that I had to let go, of course, but
yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
So
well, maybe for another book.
Yeah,
exactly. My question was also going to be about research because 1981 is, I mean, it is historical fiction at this point, which is like kind of mind-blowing. But I want to know, or I'm curious about, like, whether or not you were relying on memories or whether you relied more on research when you were writing.
I think both, and in some chapters more on one, and and other chapters more on the other. I really, there were so many things that there are things that I really, really thought captured the time, and some of those didn't make it into the final text, and I still sort of miss them. But there were things that were really fun to research, really fun. I had a scene in one of the drafts where Betsy and her sister are watching the wedding of Princess Charles and Diana, and every time I read that scene, I laughed out loud. And I mean, really every time, but some things didn't make the cut. That was something I really had to research because I did not watch the wedding of Princess Di and Charles. But anyway.
Bless the internet.
Yeah, really, really. Can I ask Mary a question? What are you working on now?
Oh, I have just completed a book, a story cycle And so I haven't started anything new. I have an outline for a novel that I stopped when I decided to write the story cycle. And I will probably go back to that. But I did travel through Europe myself alone, only I was a little sooner than you. I did it in 75. And I have written an essay about it, but I'm not satisfied with the essay yet because I don't know what it says except, oh, Mary went to Europe and had a great time. And that's not enough. So, but that's one reason I was so interested in your stories about what happened in the rail coaches and the pensions. And I mean, all of it is marvelous. There were so many of us in Europe traveling around in summertime, so many young American women and men, but a lot of women, and they were usually there because of some man.
But an awful lot who traveled alone, which
a lot who traveled alone. Yeah.
Which, I mean, I don't think that happened, much earlier than that.
It was a great surprise to me.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Can you tell us something about the story cycle?
Okay, so all the stories are set in either St. Louis or sort of the rural parts of Missouri around Cape Girardeau or around Lake Pomme de Terre, or at this little town I've made up called Wolf Pass, Illinois, which is based on Grafton. But I didn't want to use Grafton. I don't mind using St. Louis, but I didn't want to use Grafton because it's such a small place. And I didn't want to be locked into, oh no, that hollow isn't there or that street isn't there. And I wanted to change, I wanted to make it a little bit smaller. And so anyway, the characters, a minor character in one story repeats as either a minor character or a less minor character in another, and they tell each other stories, and the stories they tell each other, then the character in the story that was told appears in another story. And I had a lot of fun playing around with it, and I hope other people end up liking it.
I'm sure we will.
Yeah, someday.
We do have a couple of questions that came in from the audience, so let's start with Donna's. Donna's asking, is Kasim's hair dyed, or is it a miracle that occurred because of the Hajj? I enjoyed the book.
Well, yay. Yeah, his hair is definitely dyed, and as you know, since you read the book, Donna, he, as part of the ceremonies of the Hajj, he becomes completely shaven. I mean, his beard, his mustache, his hair, he's reborn. And is that enough of an answer?
Yeah. King is asking, early on you hinted that the characters you met sparked your curiosity and imagination. Do you feel that your characters write their own stories? How much do you feel in control, or are you surprised?
Okay, I like that question. Some of both. I had no idea what was going to happen, how I was going to resolve Kasim's dyeing his hair, and what happened at the end of chapter 2 came ultimately as a great surprise to me. I mean, he opened a door and, oh my gosh, that's what I saw, which I'm not going to say. So yes, some things do seem to develop out of the characters and the situation, and I certainly didn't plan for them. Other things very much plotted out. And that's been true with my short stories, with pretty much everything. I don't know where it's necessarily going, or I do. The first thing I ever got published was a mystery novel called The Phoenix Nest. And I had an arrangement with somebody. We each had to finish something. We'd both been scarred by teachers and never finished anything. Long story. And so I had to come up very quickly with this idea because I had 1 year to complete a novel. That was the deal. And that night in the shower, I got an opening scene of a novel. And then that was the opening scene that I wrote. And I also got the end. I mean, that was the best shower I ever took. Anyway, so that time I knew the beginning and I knew the end. I had no idea what was going to happen in the middle. And that was so much fun. But anyway.
All right, I think we have time for these two last questions. So let's start with Patricia, since it kind of relates to what you were just talking about. What was the longest you put this book aside, and what made you pick it up again? Was it difficult to pick it up again, or did you feel refreshed when you did?
I put it aside for about 20 years. How's that for impressive? And when I picked it up again, it was because I had this epiphany about the structure. And I suddenly knew, that I was going to take the stories I had written as stories, and they were going to be chapters. And I had a path. Now, did I trot right down that path? No. It took me, really, it was this book was 39 years from start to finish. I enjoyed working on other things in between, and I liked the idea that it was there. One of the things that I've always enjoyed is having more than one thing going on at a time, so that if I get stuck, which I sometimes do, which I more than sometimes do, then I have something else I can go to. And, if you get your juices going in one direction, it helps with the other.
So you started the book as contemporary fiction, and it ended up as historical fiction.
Exactly right. You're the first person who said that to me.
All right, let's end with Peter's question. Peter says, great work on the book and reading. Do you use any of your friends or family members as inspiration for the characters in your books?
Well, I steal from everyone every chance I get. There are a couple lines in that Brian, whom I think of as an entertaining character, the young man who didn't say anything in the section that I read from the North. A couple lines from him, a couple lines from Declan that I took directly from one of my younger brothers. I mean, I had several things in there that family members may recognize or not. I hope maybe not. But yeah, I was once being interviewed for the short story collection, and I think I was asked to describe what kind of animal I was, or some goofy question like that. And I said, well, writers, are magpies. I mean, we steal from whomever, whatever, wherever we can.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank both of you. We are almost out of time. I want to thank both of you for this incredible conversation, this fun evening. I thought it was really delightful, and I think a lot of the audience did as well. And I do want to thank the audience for coming out tonight. A reminder that the book is available for sale at left-bank.com. I will reshare the link right now. And Margaret is so excited to be sending out signed copies into the world. A lot of our copies are already signed, but Margaret will be coming in to personalize copies as well. So if you would like a personalized copy, you can request that in your order comments, and we will get that into Margaret's hands the next time she comes into the store.
Yay.
All right. Well, have a great evening, Mary. Thank you for joining us.
Shane.
Thank you.
We'll see everyone soon.
Okay.
Thank you, Shane.
Bye-bye.